So we're just gonna reach over and just
You're right in it.
Dude, look at that. That is so crazy. Absolutely insane. You can see he's got some of these components installed. We've got the stock tachometer installed in there. Carbon dash mocked up in position. Looks pretty crazy. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Beast Motorsport YouTube channel. So we are back in the lab with Kyle. We're doing an update video on the Sequential, the carbon fiber dash. As always, Kyle has been doing a ton of work, and I've already seen everything, and I'm pretty blown away. I'm pretty impressed. So we're gonna walk you guys through all this and show you this today. But we're getting close, man. We're getting so close to the Sequential being done. Carbon fiber dash done. We do have a few other things that we're gonna do on the front of the car, and we'll probably talk about that today as well. But as the Sequential goes, we're getting really close. How's everything going with the project, man? It's a lot of work.
Yeah, one of our previous videos, we had talked about mounting the whole shift assembly on what was a different solution to what's already out in the marketplace, but basically creating a custom center console for mounting the shift assembly to. So we've completed that, got it all linked up to the trans, and she's clicking through the gears. So that's pretty awesome. A bunch of custom details with that. Working through the carbon dash, making fitment adjustments for the steering column, the custom gauge or the stock gauge cluster, the ignition system in that. So that's just all coming together, and so it's really sick to see some final fitment test happening. So
yeah, this is pretty exciting, man. This is like next level work. Yeah. It's pretty epic. So we'll show you guys right now, but I'm just like blown away. So let's get into it. Okay, so here we've got the new custom center console to mount the tractive shift mechanism here. So I'm gonna let Kyle explain this, but the way that most people do this is they weld like a little plate on the side of the tunnel right here, and they mount everything to that. But Kyle saw this as an opportunity to kind of create his own custom mounting solution that ended up being a lot stronger and looks badass. Like, this looks absolutely insane. So why don't you explain to us what you got going on here, Kyle?
So basically, the engineering drawings of this assembly specify some specific fitments of these two pieces. You have the shift arm assembly, and then you have basically the link that passes through the tunnel and goes to the transmission itself. In order for these parts to work in conjunction with each other, there's certain angles that have to be achieved in order for it to do it with clearing, but also so it's working properly and has the correct amount of force on the actual mechanism, the linkage that's attached to the transmission. Specifically, there's an angle here of 90 degrees that needs to happen between this face and this face. So being able to match those angles with two independent parts, assembly here, it becomes very challenging. And having to do that while it's in the car and making micro adjustments between the eyelet here that goes to the transmission would also be challenging. So I had noticed when Nick, we had took out his old shift assembly, I had noticed that there was stock locations in the tunnel already where there was hardware that had been removed where the old dash assembly went into. Well, those are already reinforced bolted locations. And so I actually reused every single hole that existed, and I didn't drill any new holes in the tunnel. Rather, I used the pre-existing structure and added our own assembly that literally keys in over the top. And you'll see some images that Nick's gonna show you here in a sec, but you'll see that this whole thing comes out as one assembly. Simply by removing this one bolt here, you take out this link and the whole thing lifts off after you remove the screws.
And it's super clean looking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, when I first walked in here and I saw this, I just started laughing. I was just blown away because it's so clean looking. Keep in mind, he is gonna paint this black. So this piece of steel will be painted black. But the way that it just fits into this tunnel and slots in and bolts into all the stock locations, it is so friggin' clean. It's insane. And then look at this carbon fiber, little thing here. It says in Meyer 206 USL. That's Kyle's business. but man, it really came out good. And then when you shake this thing, it shakes the whole car.
Yeah.
So like the whole car is shaking right now. So it's extremely strong.
Yeah.
So a really cool solution that Kyle came up with. I love it. I think it looks amazing. It's so clean. It's really cool. It's like factory race car stuff.
Yeah, and some details that I was trying to think forward as far as the actual aesthetics of this are fairly simple. However, from a top view, you see that there's these sharp angles. Well, 90-degree angles are not necessarily as strong as, an acute or an obtuse angle. So by using these angles, I was also able to add some aesthetic interest to such a simple part, but it added so much structure because back here, for instance, you'll notice how it kicks out and then actually integrates into the shape of the tunnel. And these are all vertical ribs that were welded to this. This is not a press broke part. I simply TIG welded these separate pieces all the way around, blended the welds, and there's even a rib that goes at an angle across underneath. You can kind of see some of the deformation simply because it's sucking these parts so tight together.
Oh, so there's like a little piece
there's
that comes
a
across
support
there.
rib that goes underneath, and I'll actually,
Okay,
you'll see some pictures of that as well.
But yeah, I thought this was bent, and so like, the welding and everything is just beautiful. So I thought he bent this whole part, but these are all
welded on. Yeah.
Welded on.
And then a couple of details that you wouldn't notice, and that's on purpose, is the fact that when you walk into the car, you don't see the load sensor at all. Because there's a cable that actually runs from the back side of the shifter here, and it goes down. Well, we put some clips inside of the shifter so that it tucks this whole cable assembly. And using an elongated hole, I'm able to not kink this cable at all, and then it passes through our carbon fiber plate that we have underneath here in a similar grommet. And these are firewall grommets, and so that all the cables pass through at a very graceful angle and they're not kinking anything. And keep in mind the tolerances between these parts are very tight. So we have a distance of probably about a 1/2 inch off the top of the tunnel to the bottom side of this. So getting those tolerances really tight, making sure everything fits copacetic, being able to dial in the individual armatures, drilling and tapping these tiny holes. It's all extremely challenging, but well worth it in the end.
And then, so the steering wheel is going to be about right here. Can you see me?
Yeah.
So the steering wheel is going to be about right here. So we're just going to reach over and just
be right in it.
Dude, look at that. That is so crazy. Absolutely insane.
Nick's pretty jacked about this whole assembly, but purposely you're probably not even noticing the fact that the whole dash structure is in here now. And it's been extremely simplified. We have the main support here that already existed, but there was a whole bunch of bracketry over here that got cut off. There's brackets on both the far left side over there, and then this far right side that got removed. And you also note, if you've ever gotten behind your dash, how rusted this part is. Well, I hand sanded this with Brillo pads and got it so it had no rust on it, and then we got an enamel on there and put all the stock clips back in because, well, we have those existing stock mounting points for the new carbon dash to go in. And even the harness will actually snap into its existing location into the stock snaps, and so it's literally going to fit like all OEM right across. So that's pretty exciting because you don't even see this. It kind of falls back into the distance. But
yeah, so this metal bracket he's talking about, this is where the carbon fiber dash is going to fit to.
Yeah.
But it looks really, really clean. And this is just so cool. It's cool to be able to see the shifter actually like installed and just like click through the gears a little bit. It's all kind of coming together, and it's kind of becoming a reality. But yeah, this is really cool, and I just want to get a better angle on this plate right here. Like, look at that.
So there you go. And it's actually etched quite a bit into that carbon, so it has the texture of the layer underneath. So, and then keep in mind this will actually be a satin black to match these structures. And then these rivets will actually probably be a stainless so that we call attention to the really cool finish on all these parts. So even those linkages have been sanded, so they have a satin finish because Nick's, his nice e-brake lever has that satin finish. So I'm trying to match all those finishes.
All right, so Kyle's been working on the carbon fiber dash, and you can see he's got some of these components installed. We've got the stock tachometer installed in there. This is basically the key fob where your key goes, and then you've got the ignition start here. It looks simple, right? It looks factory. It looks easy, but Kyle was saying that this was actually more challenging than doing that plate on top of the tunnel to mount the shift lever. So why don't you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, so reason for the complications of this is if you go back to other videos, you'll notice how there was a flat surface and it transitioned into the curvature that's on the top. Well, the way that the dash is installed, the OEM way, is that the whole thing kind of clicks in with this unassembled. And that being because you can't reach in underneath the tunnel and snap the wires into the back of the actual gauge cluster. So you have to be able to put this in last. The other trick part is that they don't use screws other than on the top to pinch it into place. So there's some serious tight tolerances in order to get these things to fit right. But also what you don't notice is that there's been a 1/2 inch overall taken out of this gauge cluster. Because when this mold was made, the carbon was probably molded over an existing dash to some extent. So everything is that much smaller all the way around. Not to mention that the shapes aren't the exact same. So you actually have to modify both and go back and forth, take some off of the gauge cluster, and then take some off of the carbon. Because as you come further and further forward to make this hole bigger, since it's a tapered hole, there's a fine line between removing too much carbon and all of a sudden the part is too big and then it won't slip in and key in like we initially wanted it to.
So this basically, there's 2 screws that you can remove, and then this flips out, and so so that we can connect all the electronics behind it. So he's going to show us how he does that.
So 1 screw.
Two screws.
And literally boom.
Damn.
And that's it. It's wild.
Dude, that's crazy.
And it fits tight. And so that's what I was saying. You can see here, I've actually removed everything up into the actual, the plastic trim piece without trying to crack it, without removing this lip, because that lip is basically what bonds this whole layer and keeps it airtight so that the dust doesn't get inside. And then creating another gasket up here so that when these parts mate, they mate tightly. And so then if I flip this around, we can really start to see the business that's necessary in order to make this dream happen. So this piece was actually grafted from the old dash and reformed to fit as a part of the carbon dash. What it does is it adds structure to the bottom of what would be a flimsy joint, and it also adds the feature that the key-in feature, and it adds the thickness that we need for these tabs to key into that surface on the bottom side.
So it kind of just snaps in because
just
of
like
this
the original,
piece here.
exactly, just like the original did. Without this piece, we would just have a thin, flimsy carbon transition. And you can really start to appreciate the curvature that was cut in here, and the fact that this was grafted from the old dash as well, bonded to the carbon, and even these surfaces had to be sanded just ever so slightly so that the piece mated perfectly without a big air gap between them.
Amazing. Really, really cool. I can't even imagine trying to like plan this all out and figure this out and do
Lots
all
of
this.
templates and taping, yeah, and actually using the old pieces to find the curvature. Because there's no, I could have done like a 3D scan, but then we'd have to 3D model it and then get the geometry that way. But being able to cut apart the old dash and almost slip it around here and find that geometry was super critical.
Yeah.
and then figuring out what, because we're trying to do everything as light as possible and only what's necessary, but we need as much strength as we can because we don't want everything rattling around as we're cruising down the racetrack.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of people that do a carbon fiber dash end up going with an aftermarket ECU. I didn't want to go down that road. The car's just not at that point yet where I need a different ECU, so we're on the stock ECU, and that's why we wanted to maintain the stock tachometer. So
Right.
It created a little bit of challenge to get that tachometer to fit into this carbon fiber dash. But obviously Kyle solved that. It looks really factory. It looks super clean, and it looks OEM.
Yeah, and then so moving forward with other modifications is that one thing you realize is that on the stock dash, this cutout for the steering column is actually a closed circle, and it's actually really big. Well, once we knew that we were going to be using one of the stock pieces for the steering column, well, it intersects all the way almost up to the gauge cluster. And so we had to basically, if you want to come around here, Nick. We had to create a custom trim ring to gain this structure back from these two independent pieces now once that was taken out. And now that we're purposely saving this on the steering column, it'll actually snap back into the OEM leather, right back into there, and he'll still have full adjustability up into his carbon dash, and it'll look OEM.
That's pretty cool.
So this serves a huge purpose, not just for aesthetics, but it gained a lot of structure back into this assembly, and it prevents any sharp surfaces from where your knees are. This has all been formed to be radiused, and so that none of these surfaces are sharp anymore. This protruding corner of carbon would have been really sharp on both sides.
Yeah, it's nice and smooth now.
Yeah.
Huh, pretty dang cool. All right, and then we've got the key fob, and we've got the start-stop switch.
So yeah, these seem so simple, but they needed to be in this location since we're using some of the back plastic structure. There's only so much room for where this piece fits, and the ribbon connections, the ribbon wires that connect this piece to this piece and travel over to the computer itself, they need to be in these exact locations. But the curvature of this aftermarket dash does not fit the curvature of the OEM dash. So I actually had to create these steps and get those forms to fit.
So these are pieces of carbon right here.
Yeah, and they actually make sure that the new surfaces meet up. And notice how there's no screws. Well,
yeah, there you go.
yeah, that's fucking trick.
So that snaps off, just like that, just like OEM.
And now you can see how the carbon has been perfectly matched to these surfaces. And you can see how the grain matches up.
Look at that. Even the grain, the carbon fiber grain details.
And then being able to remove these so you can snap in the wiring with the components removed is super important. So all these details, the keyed features that are inside of this piece,
Yep.
are keyed into there. And on the back side you have your,
the back side.
it's basically a snap ring, and it gives us thickness so that these actual snaps on the side now have the proper thickness.
Yeah.
So that when it snaps in properly.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. Cool stuff. Why don't you show us the plastic skin
Yeah.
that's going to go in here?
So
this is the stock dash plastic skin that he modified to sit right back in here, and this is going to be bonded to the carbon.
So all these surfaces have been smoothed out and basically prepared to mate with this surface. So everything that's kind of this satin finish has been sanded and really prepared to be bonded to here, because now this piece fits perfectly in
Look
here.
at that. So that's giving this carbon dash a ton of structure and rigidity, and it gives us mounting points to mount back into the car.
Correct.
But yeah, look at this. It just like fits like a glove. He's got this thing just set in here ready to be bonded.
Then we had talked about a custom defrost. So these are little fan motors that I found. And these basically, I created these features inside of the structure, and you can see that there's the slots for the air to pass through, and these literally key right into these slots. And then on the bottom side, all you see is where the air comes out through those slots.
Yeah, you see that?
So essentially, and then you have your defrost, and we have these basically symmetrical fan motors that go in both sides, on the driver's side and the passenger side.
Yeah,
and particularly on this side was challenging because you have the gauge cluster that comes through, and then also the steering column comes passing right through here. And so the distance between this part and the steering column was about a 1/16 of an inch. And so finding the place where this could actually fit left to right without intersecting our clip that we're using was challenging, but it all fits. So.
Yeah, and this was kind of our solution for defrost, you know, because we removed the heater core, so no more stock defrost. So these little things weigh nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
And hopefully it's a good solution. I think it will be.
Yeah, they push a lot of air, and you know they come with their own. They're just 12-volt powered, so that's great. And it's a 3-speed, so there's actually 1, 2, 3 modes that you can crank up the air that comes out of them, and a power on and off button that came with it.
And then we'll have the power on and off on the dash.
On the dash,
right?
yeah.
So it'll be on the dash.
Exactly.
The 2 other things that we do have to add to the dash still is the Garmin lap timer, and then we've got our gear display from Drenth that displays the transmission gear that you're in, and so we got to kind of figure out where we're going to mount those. So we're not 100% sure yet. Here first, we're just going to kind of mock up the carbon fiber dash and show you guys what that looks like, and then it's going to help us locate where we want to put the Drenth gear display unit at.
But yeah,
you look good in there with that sequential next to you.
Whap, whap, pap, pap, pap. All right, hand me that thing.
Man, that looks good. Carbon dash mocked up in position. Looks pretty crazy. That's a nice distance from the shifter to the dash.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh, it's gonna be so sick. Yeah, it's like right here. It sits even, you know, it sits further closer to you because you've got your adapter on your steering wheel.
Yeah.
The next time you come, I'll have probably that whole steering column in here with everything attached to it. Because now this thing can actually slide over that. It's not entrapped by it.
Yeah.
Since this is an open shape, I can still work around it.
All right, so now we're moving to the underside of the car here to check this out.
So you can see the original carbon plate here. This used to this covers the existing opening of the old shifter.
Oh yeah.
And so this grommet is actually separate from the one up there, and you can see I was saying how it passes through at a really nice angle. And so with those tolerances being so close, this is an important location because we could have easily pinched a cable between. And so this actually makes it super easy to take that whole assembly off. And then I've basically got, you know, my zip ties, but these are the mounts to hold the cable tight so that it's out of the way. And essentially I am gonna bring the reverse lockout cable right through the same hole. And there's a solid mount right here coming from the back side. And then it's gonna go into the reverse lever right here.
That's what that is.
And so that bicycle cable basically connects to this point here.
So this is the reverse.
Correct.
Huh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's neat to see it all like hooked up. You see the shift linkage coming down through the tunnel.
Yeah, exactly.
Hooked up right there.
So, and this is what I was saying, you can actually
actuate the gears.
Yeah. So.
Huh. That's crazy.
Yeah, and then like being able to adjust these. So like this isn't perfect. It's literally exactly in between at rest.
Yeah.
So there's no strain on anything. That's awesome. Wow. That's all I can say. This is a pivoting joint. This is a ball joint right here actually. And so once this is tightened, there's a washer on the back side. And this is tightened, and this has the ability to rotate this way and this way. And that's because you're moving in 2 different planes as it shifts. So that's pretty sick, actually. And so getting that geometry figured out up here, and this is actually was a challenging hole to make because of all the different features. You can see, the structure, and getting to both of those different thicknesses. There's actually three different layers of metal that I had to go through and make a circle. And I actually went through, because there's about a 1/4 inch gap in between each layer, and I went through and I pinched each layer together so I could pass through the whole grommet and watertight and seal those 3 layers back together so that, water won't make it in through the side of any of that. And I was able to get the grommet to pinch on both sides, which is pretty sweet. And then the cable, the load sensor will go up to the front and then go through the firewall like we talked about.
So another piece that we decided to install that I've also had in storage for quite a long time is the front intake from Geoff Steel. So you guys might recognize this. This is a Geoff Steel front intake. And then we also have a custom radiator that Nice Motorsport built so that I could run this Geoff Steel intake. So we got the radiator down here. Basically just allows everything to fit because some things move around when you run this front intake. And you have to modify the radiator, you have to run a different radiator. So that should hopefully solve that problem there.
Yeah, so basically the old radiator goes in, it's oriented in this direction. The size, basically you would have another about 6 inches off the top. And this is the radiator here because we've removed the AC unit. So you could see right away that there's no room for that intake to go through there. So essentially by having,
yeah, it hits the radiator.
Yeah, a lower profile, it'll still sit at the same length down here. We'll be able to have that intake basically pass right over the top of it. And then you'll end up with, hopefully no clearance issue.
But I'll insert some photos of what a installed Geoff Steel intake looks like. But basically this Dynon elbow and this whole airbox assembly is going to go away, and then the Geoff Steel comes right into these front kidney grills here. I did hit up Epic Motorsport. That's the current tune that I have on this car right now. He said that you can run this Geoff Steel front intake without doing a custom dyno tune. So basically more air into the engine is just good, and it's going to adjust for that increased air intake. He did say, if I ever want to throw this thing on a dyno, that he could remote tune it and we could kind of get that final little horsepower gains. But I think it's expected to get about 20 wheel horsepower with the Geoff Steel intake. I don't know if that's with the custom tune or without, but I'll let you know on my butt dyno how it feels.
But yeah, he mentioned that it was a closed loop tune, so that meaning that it's self-learning, it makes adjustments. So if it senses more air coming, it'll add more fuel, and it continues. It's a closed loop, so it'll keep taking the information through your MAF and other sensors that the engine's taking the information in. And so by it being a closed loop systems, it's nice because, or closed loop program, is because it'll continually monitor. Yeah. You can really see how this integrates just by looking at the geometry, how we're changing direction. So this coming out this direction, and now we're just going straight in right through the front of the car. So way more direct, and that's going to be awesome. Yeah, so I'm assuming that this scoop feature is going to go.
Oh, it's going to rest at the bottom here.
Yeah, basically right up here.
Yeah.
And then this shape is essentially, if you were to cut your car, you can see this shape happening.
It looks like a tractor attachment.
Yeah.
That's a lot of air going to be going in there.
But that's why right now looks like there's a lot of hopes and dreams to hold this thing in. So there's going to be dueling.
All right, guys. Well, that is it. That's the update on the Sequential. A lot of action in that video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Really, really cool. Seeing it for the first time in person, seeing that gear lever installed was pretty awesome. It means that we're getting closer to the end, and we're getting closer to getting this car out on track and testing.
For sure. Yeah. Connecting the actual drive shaft, that'll be exciting. The rear wheel spinning under the transmission, that'll be great. Having all the extra mounts and the screen on the dash, that'll be cool. So
yeah,
there's going to be a lot of elements coming together. Where we've been working on the individual elements, and Nick's being able to see the new shift assembly in there, that's kind of just the beginning of starting to pull stuff together.
Yeah.
But we're starting to pull stuff together as opposed to pull stuff apart. So that's what's exciting, and we're starting to reap the benefits of that just by being able
We're
to.
seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, exactly.
We are getting closer. So
Yeah.
thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and we'll be back soon. Take care.
Yeah.
Peace.